Fine. It's done. Time to go.
This is Lucifer, portrayed by Peter Stormare in the now cult classic Constantine. Lucifer appears on screen for roughly 9 minutes of total screen time, but is generally considered by the fans to be the standout character of the film. This is Oberyn Martell, portrayed by the fantastic Pedro Pascal in Game of Thrones.
When your father's army took the city,
wasn't actually.
they butchered those children. My nephew and niece carved them up and wrapped them in Lannister cloaks. And my sister, you know what they did to her? I'm asking you a question.
I've heard rumors.
Oberyn appears for 29 minutes of screen time across the entire series, just about half of the runtime of a single episode. It stands as possibly the most iconic character in all of Season 4. And no discussion of side characters would be complete without the Big Daddy himself, Hannibal Lecter, portrayed by Anthony Hopkins.
The census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
This character and performance were so captivating that despite only being on screen for 16 minutes, 13% of the runtime, Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar for it. Many people consider Hannibal Lecter to be the best side character in cinema history, and the best part of Silence of the Lambs as a whole. All of these characters that I mentioned are side characters, which is crazy to think about when you consider that side characters are mainly insignificant. They don't typically have distinguished features or standout dialogue. Heck, most side characters don't have dialogue at all. I think we've all engaged with the fiction where, sure, you do love the main character, but there's just that one side character that steals the show. My hot take is that the mark of really good stories are that the side characters are just as entertaining, if not more entertaining, than the main characters. But why would that be? Why is it so often the case that the person at the center of the story is not the most interesting?
I'd rather be shining.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. Many of you out there are writers, and for those of you who aren't, you are still interested in how these characters came to be. I am Alex, a professional novel and script editor and author, and I want to get down into the nitty-gritty of characterization with you. If you like what you hear and you want to submit your manuscripts to me, or even just have a chat about writing, you can find a link to my website and services down below. But in our discussion of side characters, we have to start by first admitting that not all side characters are created equally. In fact, the term side character is more of an umbrella description that encompasses many different character archetypes. You have background characters, which are pretty self-explanatory. They just appear in the background of your work, so the setting does not feel empty. Well, I mean, unless you want it to. Then you have your minor or tertiary characters. These are characters who maybe have a few lines or are named, but again, only really exist to fill out the world or serve as information or jokes being delivered by the main characters.
My cabbages!
You're gonna pay for this!
2 cabbages, please.
And then you have your secondary or supporting characters. These are your recurring, often named individuals that assist your main characters in achieving their goals or interacting with overarching conflict. Now, it's almost impossible to have a truly show-stopping background or minor character, mainly because any narrative information utilized to build them up would ascend them into secondary character status. However, I would be remiss to not point out that even though writers may not intend for it, fans can elevate background and minor characters to star status. TR-8R is a great example from Star Wars, saying only one word, but reaching meme fandom. Raider! So then really, when considering actual, well-written side characters, it's only the secondary or supporting characters that we have to be concerned with. In understanding how to make an interesting side character, there are essentially only a few basic elements. Firstly, iconic side characters almost always have something to do with the main character's conflict. That could mean they help them move through an existing conflict, or could be that the side character themselves presents a new or altered conflict. Here you can think of possibly the most iconic Disney side characters, Timon and Pumbaa. Some people will say that Genie is up there with them too, but others will argue that Genie isn't a side character at all, but I'll leave that debate for the comments. Timon and Pumbaa directly interact with our main character's conflict of identity and duty. While completely well-meaning, they pull a lion to eat bugs and live a life of leisure, where the thematic messaging of the narrative calls for Simba to choose the harder life of accepting responsibility and being a leader. And the second characteristic iconic side characters have is that they must be exaggerated when compared to other characters in the story. Now, when I say exaggerated, that means they are stylized around some theme, or alter some expected reality of the setting. If we reference back to Timon and Pumbaa, they're about as stylized around laziness and leisure as possible. I mean, they literally have an entire song about it.
It's our problem-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata.
They are as different from all the aristocratic, rule-oriented lions as possible, both in action and lifestyle, and that's why they act as such a good foil to Simba. But the last and probably most important aspect of a memorable show-stealing side character is that even in their small appearance, they should tell a vast story. You can actually think of these side characters as the purest expression of showing instead of telling, I think. And the more you can show their history, personality, and beliefs, the more enthralling they become. There have been thousands of sleazy, coked-up Wall Street characters in films before, but none of them were like Matthew McConaughey's Mark Hanna. He was linked to our main character and assisted him through the conflict as, you know, his own flawed vision of it is, and he is undoubtedly exaggerated and stylized. Even among the crazy characters in The Wolf of Wall Street, Mark Hanna was by comparison turned up to 11, but he was never so ridiculous that he seemed out of place. This is actually the mark, again, of a well-written, well-managed side character. If we take a look at something like, you know, the Joker from Suicide Squad, he definitely was exaggerated and much more different than the other cast members, but he did feel out of place. You can't just go completely insane with your side characters, they have to fit within the scope and span of your narrative. And that's what happens with Mark Hanna in Wolf of Wall Street. And just from his dialogue and demeanor, you could tell the entire history of Mark Hanna as a character.
But if you can make a client's money at the same time, it's advantageous to everyone, correct?
No.
His guidance for our main character gives us a window into how twisted his long career on Wall Street has made him think. We know exactly how Mark Hanna is in just a few minutes, and that makes him so engaging. Avatar, as always, has other great examples. Wan Shi Tong, Ko the Face Stealer, Boomy, and Combustion Man are all involved in the conflicts of the main character, some of them being the conflicts. And all of them are exaggerated, even amongst the spirits and benders of the Avatar world, but still in a way that makes them feel like they are a part of the world. Both their physical characteristics and their personalities are each based around stylization, and stylization of a specific theme. Ko is maintaining composure in the face of fear, fear being that which we do not know or understand. Combustion Man is a silent, ever-persistent killing machine, literally part metal, whose loud and audacious bending speaks for him. And Wan Shi Tong, of course, is literally an owl, a bird symbolizing wisdom far and wide, guarding an ancient library. And Boomy is the personification of there's a method to my madness. Every single one of these characters is indicated to have had a rich history that we haven't yet been able to dive into, but it's still there. How did Ko get Kuruk's lover's face? How long did it take Combustion Man to master his bending before he stopped blowing off parts of his body? Did Wan Shi Tong find the library, or did he build it? How did Boomy become king? Just because we don't get immediate answers doesn't make these questions or the characters they concern any less interesting. Breaking Bad is another fiction with phenomenally detailed side characters. If we just want to pick out two, Mike and Saul Goodman were fantastic. Both Mike and Saul were both integral in helping and hindering Walter, and their stylization made them unique amongst a huge and amazing cast. Mike was the old man in the young man's game, and Saul was the criminal lawyer. But again, both depicted in ways that we had not really seen before. No one was as sleazy as Saul, and no one was as mundane as Mike, but we still knew what made them tick and what was important to them, even if they were characters with the least amount of screen time, crazy enough. I think this underlies another really important point. Side characters should be written with the same amount of care and thought as main characters. All side characters believe they are main characters, and your audience will not know how important your side character may or may not become. If you treat your side characters like an afterthought without consideration of their wants or needs or backgrounds, they will feel flat. A well-executed side character has all the makings of a main character, just without the time to explore them. And it's side characters like these that are written deeply and genuinely that can become main characters in their own stories. Saul and Mike were the centerpieces of a whole amazing spin-off series, but they could only become that because of the depth they initially brought in Breaking Bad. And to touch upon something else, for clarity's sake, exaggeration does not always have to mean over the top. Some people can be exaggerations in the sense that they are overly normal for the setting when compared to all other characters. Another Breaking Bad character that fits this mold is Lawson, the gun salesman. In a world with Tucos and Gus's and Walters and Jesse's, he's just a normal guy who's down to earth with his sales, kind of feels like a neighborhood dad, and that makes him instantly unique and recognizable.
For your trouble? Oh, it's no trouble. I make my living on repeat business. When you need what I'm offering, you know how to find me.
Another great example of this is Hannibal Lecter, where exaggeration actually comes from his mundanity. Silence of the Lambs gets us accustomed to the absolute insanity of Buffalo Bill, then the mounting lunacy of the other inmates before showing us a calm, composed Hannibal Lecter. His cool demeanor instantly makes him stand out among the other killers we've seen, but we still get to see that he is anything from boring. Exaggeration and stylization is the hallmark of a good side character, especially in villains. Rattlesnake Jake has a Gatling gun for a tail and a tiny drawn-on mustache. He's the embodiment of a Western legend. Lucifer in Constantine wears a white suit, but his feet are covered in tar. He licks and growls and snaps like an animal, yet he walks like the CEO of a major company. It's so alluring. Him and Jack Horner not only create a conflict for our main characters, they are representations of unrepentant evil, easily recognized by both the design and action as ineffably twisted individuals.
Oh, that was horrible. Your wish is horrible. You're horrible. You're an irredeemable monster.
Oh, what took you so long, idiot?
But even still, I will admit that there is one more category that goes into making a show-stealing side character, and it's unfortunately something that I can't really teach, because it's the rule of cool. Some side characters take over not because their character construction, or just, I should say, only because of it, but because what they do is just really freaking awesome. Rock Lee, Kimimaro, and Gaara all have like the coolest fights in Naruto, so it makes sense why they are more loved than Naruto. It's the stories that their struggles tell, and how they bring something new to the table each time they are in conflict. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park is so cool that he literally became a sex symbol, even to this day. Erwin Smith and Levi Ackerman are like the platonic ideals of masculine leaders, and basically have cultivated their own fan base inside the AOT fan base. Heck, your main characters don't even have to be human to steal the show. I will never relive the high I experienced when I saw Blue ride a T-Rex to duo the Indominus Rex. It's one of the coolest action sequences in modern history, and it's dumb as rocks, and I don't care because it works. So much of writing, whether it's the cerebral construction of side characters through the adherence to conflict and thematic stylization, or if it's the "this is too cool not to put in" approach, good writing comes down to understanding what your story is about, what your characters represent, and what your audience is interested in seeing. Only by being tuned in with your reader or watcher can you give them what they want, and only by investigating the truth of your conflict and main characters and narrative can you create a fiction worth engaging with. Side characters don't just have to be supporting pieces, they can command the spotlight, even for just a single scene or the entire narrative. But to do so, they must affect the conflict, they must stand out from other characters by centering on a stylized theme, and they must tell their own story genuinely. Because maybe those side characters will have their own stories one day. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way unto the end. If you like what you heard, give me a like, comment, and subscribe. If you really want to be a homie, check out my Patreon. I'm actually doing a special where you can get all my tiers for $1. Check out my website. I will leave a link in the description below if you want to submit manuscripts or have a call with me. As always, it was a pleasure, and I will talk to you all again soon.